So occasionally when you're a YouTuber or an Instagrammer, we are capable of making some bad advice, giving some bad advice. So for those of you who watched my video earlier this week where I told you that your girlfriend or wife would probably rather have a knife than a diamond engagement ring, I apologize. And maybe it's a good weekend for you to just get out of the house and go camping for a while. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. I hope everybody's having a good time. I got a couple people over here on Instagram watching. If you guys are enjoying over on Instagram and you want to get involved with the chat, head over to YouTube. I usually have a bigger audience over on YouTube. And I really have no way of doing like an interactive chat for Instagram. I leave that up there if anybody just wants to watch and they're not worried about chat. But for those of you who do want to get involved in the chat, head over to YouTube. And as usual, we just have a couple rules here. Be kind to each other. Be kind to my moderators. It's okay to disagree with me. But, give me reasons. Be respectful. Don't just say, oh, your video is stupid. Like that's not constructive. Tell me why my video is stupid, right? I hope you guys are having a good Friday night. Let's say hi to a few people. Sassy Gal Prepping, I appreciate you. So those of you guys who are watching, Sassy Gal Prepping and I are going to be live streaming collaboratively together next week. So stay tuned for that. I think we're going to be talking about mental health, first aid, but we'll talk Sassy and figure all that stuff out. Lazarus Long, how are you doing? Happy Valentine's Day to you. Rob B, thank you for joining us. Southern Tier Prepper, thank you. Appreciate you all. And it looks like that's it so far. So if you're lurking and you're new, don't be shy. We've got a good group here. Everybody's kind to each other. Southern Tier Prepper says, I got hubby a new knife. He's currently probably at the gas station trying to scrounge up something for me. Daughter was given a promise ring by her boyfriend. That's nice. I love that. That's great. Utah Mike, thank you for hanging out. Thanks for letting me know you're lurking. Appreciate y'all. All right, so what we're going to talk about tonight in honor of Valentine's Day was how do you get your partner involved with prepping, right? This is a question that I see come up a lot on the forums, and I've never really tackled this one. I've got like 800 videos here on the channel now, and this is a topic that I don't think I've ever talked about before. So I will tell you that I'm blessed that Mrs. Sarge already has kind of an emergency preparedness kind of mind, not necessarily as hardcore into it as I am, but she certainly understood, the value of, having extra batteries and extra food and preparing for storms and things like that. So I came into this situation blessed in that my partner was already kind of on board with some of this stuff. My ex-wife, not so much. She was a good person. She just wasn't really into the prepping thing that much. So, although she did know a lot about like farm animals and stuff like that. So, she taught me how to raise chickens and things like that. And so, in a different way, she had like some homesteading skills and some natural talent with animals and things like that. So, so she brought some stuff to the table too. So I want to ask, first of all, and this is for chat, I want you to let me know, what are some reasons you think that people's partner, their spouse, their girlfriend, boyfriend, fiance might not be wanting to get involved with prepping, why they might be resistant to that? Okay. And while you're throwing your stuff up there in chat, I'm going to give you some of my thoughts on this, and then I'm going to go through, I did a little research on this, and coming at it also not just as a prepper, but somebody who does some marriage counseling. I'm a therapist by trade. Most of you guys know that. And one of the big things about being a marriage counselor is there's human patterns, right? So sometimes when I'm working with a patient, or sometimes when I'm working with one of my supervisees that I'm training to become a fully independent licensed clinician, they'll tell me about what's going on, and I'll say, this is what's going to happen next. And I have a pretty good track record of, sorry, my allergies are acting up a little bit today. I've got a pretty good track record of being able to predict people's behaviors. And people will say, well, how did you do that? It's because I've been doing this so long. I've been doing therapy for 25 years that human beings have patterns. And I think that it's somewhat cultural, right? Like, so if I went to try to do therapy in a different part of the world, I may not have that kind of accuracy that I have here in the United States. My my accuracy is based on my observations of 25 years of watching human behavior and having people talk to me about their, deep dark secrets. So there are 4 things that couples generally are fighting about that will get them into couples counseling. Prepping is not one of them, but we're going to get to that. And a lot of people think that people end up in divorce because of infidelity. Yes and no. Infidelity is usually the last element of a relationship that's going bad. Now, keep in mind there are people out there who are just narcissists and whatnot that don't care about their partner and they'll cheat, and so that's not what I'm talking about tonight. I'm talking about healthy relationships, otherwise healthy relationships that go bad over time because of these 4 things, and then as people drift apart, then the bigger problems start, like infidelity and things like that. Okay, so the 4 big things. Are you ready? Write this down. This is important. The four big things that couples fight about is, number 1, budget. That's one. How we save, how we spend our money. Okay, that absolutely is going to come into play in this discussion about how to get your partner involved in prepping. Budget. Number 2, parenting styles. That's a big one, right? Like, so so what I usually tell my couples that I'm working with is you can be a very lenient experiential learning type parent where, you're not really harsh with punishments, and that's okay. And you can be very strict parents. I'm not talking about like corporal punishment and stuff like that, but just very strict parents, and that's okay too. In both cases, your kids are probably going to turn out right if you're on the same page, if you're backing each other up, if you're not criticizing the other person's parenting style in front of the children. That's the key. It's not that one parenting style is going to be more successful than the other. In my opinion and observations of 25 years of doing this, it has to do with, are you on the same page and backing each other up? Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3 is chores. And that can come into play here with some elements of prepping as well. Couples fight about chores. People usually, one person's feeling like they're doing more of the chores, or one person's tired of doing a particular chore for 10 years, or one person feels resentful and one person doesn't feel appreciated. Or even like how much we do chores, right? Because people come into this with your own cultural backgrounds as to like, how much are we going to clean the house, right? Some people grow up in a household where you cleaned the house top to bottom every single day. Other people grew up in a house where like clothes got thrown on the floor. I'm not saying either one is necessarily bad. They're just different. And if you're not on some kind of same page on that, that tends to cause problems. So there's 1, 2, 3. And the last one has to do with your love languages, right? So if you're not familiar, there's a book out there called The 5 Love Languages. Gary Chapman is the author. I recommend all couples read that, actually, when they come into therapy. That's one of the first questions I ask them is, have you read the 5 love languages or taken the love languages test? Because that will tell you a lot about your partner, and your partner will learn a lot about you. So not to get too in depth about the love languages, because I'm probably going to cover that a different day on the mental health channel. But your love languages are physical touch, quality time, words of affirmation, gift giving, and what is the last one? I'm forgetting one. Physical touch, quality time, gift giving, words of affirmation. If anybody remembers, put it in chat. I'm blanking out on the 5th one right now, and I don't have time to look it up. All right, so I'm going to go to your comments now. I want to see what you all said about why it's hard to sometimes get a partner on board with this, or why they might sometimes be resistant. All right, let's see. Southern Tier Prepper says, hubby has always been into farming and self-sufficiency. Prepping is kind of a natural progression for him. Sure. I think homesteaders can make that transition to prepping really easily. I think if you're into bushcraft, you can make that transition into survival very easily. If you're into survivalism, you can make that transition to bushcraft fairly easily. You're more into the storage than him. Okay, cool. Some people just don't like having stuff. Yes. Some people believe that the stores will always be open and full of things, right? Like that's 100% true. Some people prefer a very minimalist lifestyle. I actually really think that looks cool when you go into somebody's house and it looks like really pristine. I'm not that person, but it looks really cool, and I understand why some people like that. So space and like not wanting to have a lot of stuff stored, I get that for some people. Budget, yep. Let's see. Water, bro. I'm putting you in hot water, bro. Sorry about that. Yeah, love languages. Yep, exactly. Acts of service. Was that the one that I missed? So yeah, acts of service is when you do something for somebody else. Yeah, apologize if that was the one that I missed. And yeah, and your love languages can change over time, but usually like we're gonna have one that we lean more into, right? And if you're not sure what yours is, you can actually go and search the 5 love languages test, and it will give you that information. And it's free. It's free to take the test. All right, that's a good point. Now, so Lazarus Long says, he and his wife went 9 days without power after Hurricane Hugo, and I think that a lot of times is the wake up call for a lot of people is you have to experience some kind of emergency to realize, oh, maybe the stores aren't always going to be open, or they're not going to be full of food. Or in my case, when I moved here, one of the things that I learned is that if there's a hurricane predicted, gasoline runs out really fast and they don't restock it until the hurricane is gone. So you have to get your gasoline in advance, right? That was the thing that I learned in my first hurricane here. I think that was Matthew for me. So that's your wake up call a lot of times for people, right? Me too, Rob. I love gear. I'm a big gear junkie. If you can't tell by watching my channel. Yeah, parenting styles is a big one, and so that could come into play with this too, where maybe like one parent doesn't want their kids to grow up being afraid of emergencies and prepping. Here's where I think a lot of times we go wrong when we're trying to introduce it to a partner is if you're already into prepping, you're probably at some point have gone past the storms prep, and now you're thinking about bigger situations, right? Well, you forget that the person that you might be talking to isn't there yet. They're not thinking about a war in the homeland. They're not thinking about a civil war. They're not thinking about the United States being attacked. They're not thinking about nuclear bombs. They're not thinking about these bigger events because it's so scary. Okay, and we should validate that those are scary things to think about if you don't like to think about them. So if you come into this with your partner with like, hey, I'm worried that we're going to get attacked by Russia, and they're not there, like they're just going to be like, no, I'm not thinking like that, and they're going to shut down, and you're not going to get where you need to be. So good entry point is of course storms and things like that, and recessions. Like we had a 4-year recession. We're still kind of on the fringes of it, hopefully coming out of it. But those are like good talking points when, why can't we afford the groceries that we used to afford? Why are we struggling to afford our rent or mortgage when we used to be able to do that? I'm glad you brought that up, honey. Let's talk about financial preparedness. That's part of prepping too, folks. So you find these little windows where your partner is maybe open to these conversations. Don't lead in with the nuclear war and the EMP powered zombies, because you're not going to get where you want to be with this in most cases. Hey, TJ, it's good to see you. How are you doing? You went from minimalist to prepping, big change. And prepping doesn't have to be that like you fill your house with all these bookshelves full of canned goods. You and your partner are allowed to put limitations on how much you store, right? And also remember, if you're good at gardening and hunting and fishing and foraging, then maybe you can store a little bit less food, right? So maybe you don't need a giant sized pantry full of all this stuff if you've got some good skills there. And you have to make the decision about how much food do we comfortably feel like storing in our home, right? I would say most people, whether you consider yourself a prepper or not, 2 weeks. You should at least have 2 weeks worth of, unless you live in a very tiny apartment. And then you need to start thinking about other things like, do I know how to forage? Do I can I store some sprouting equipment and some sprouts, because that doesn't take much space at all, and you can feed yourself for a very long time just on a little bit of sprouting equipment, right? So maybe for somebody that's living in a small apartment, that's a good option. Or a little micro garden that they grow indoors, right? Some of the prepping channels, I think Van City Prepper had an indoor garden that was just phenomenal. It was really good. Sassy, I think you were doing that, right? You had an indoor garden going. I don't know if you're doing that again this year. Money is a big issue, right? And so I want to talk about this right now. This is a big thing I think that people should be aware of, is that because the budget becomes a thing that so many couples fight about. And now if you're coming in this and you're saying, well, I want our family to be better prepared for emergencies, right? We'll say storms. We don't even have to go with the big stuff. We'll just say storms. I want, look what happened with Hurricane Helene. I want our family to be better prepared for if something like that was to happen in our area. Okay. That's a very reasonable conversation that most spouses would be at least open to. Let's start a discussion about this, right? Their concern may be, okay, well, money's really tight already. We're not going to go crazy with this. Okay. They didn't say no. They started a conversation, and they were open to doing things with some limitations, and you need to take that opening and go with that. Okay. In my field, we call that meeting the person where they're at. Right. So they're not ready to buy a basement and build a bunker, build a basement bunker and fill it full of, Patriot Survival, freeze-dried foods, and they're not ready for that. That's okay. You're starting a conversation to get them thinking about preparedness. So maybe they say, well, okay, yeah, we should have some storm food stored up. How about we aim for 2 weeks, right? Well, that's going to be really hard. It's going to be expensive. We can barely afford groceries as we are. Okay, could we do 2 or 3 cans a week? Yeah, we probably could afford that, right? So that's how you have those conversations. Start slow. Stop pushing them into the gas masks and the bunkers. They're not ready for that. And this is why those conversations keep failing for you. Start small. Hey, honey, I heard we have a storm coming up next week. Can you pick up a few extra packs of batteries, right? That's a reasonable starting point for somebody who doesn't think about prepping at all, right? So then if you lose power, now you've got an opportunity to say, hey, thank you so much, honey, for getting those batteries. You saved the day. Now we've got some batteries for our flashlights. That was really awesome, right? So you got to reinforce the small behaviors too, right? So if your partner is getting on board with this to a small scale and they come home with an extra pack of batteries, don't laugh and mock that and say, we need a tub full of batteries. Praise that and note that and note for yourself that, like, hey, this is progress because we all started somewhere, right? And you have to work within your budget. The budget piece of this, it can be expensive. It doesn't have to be, but when you start getting into gear and storing things and stuff like that, it can get expensive over time. And it's a reasonable thing for your partner to be worried about that, right? So start small. And if they get on board on a small scale, then you praise that, and we're gonna look to plant that seed and grow it. Okay. So thank you everybody on Instagram who's checking in. I appreciate you. If you want to get in on the chat, head on over to YouTube. It's really hard for me to follow both. So if you're watching on Instagram, head on over to YouTube. Those of you who are on YouTube, if you're getting anything of value out of this, please consider giving me a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Don't forget to check in the description for some discount codes for products that might make this journey a little bit more affordable for you. All right, let's keep going. Oh, Rob, I'm glad you're not in trouble. All right. Yeah, and if you're by yourself, of course, you don't have to worry about this as much. Grit and Grace, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you. We're just kind of getting started here. I do want to talk about the label prepping too. Anonymous Prepper Channel, I'm doing great. I hope you're having a good weekend. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody who's just tuning in. Appreciate you all. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So somebody mentioned Chernobyl HBO series. Okay. So sometimes watching a movie with them, don't go hardcore like The Road, because that scares people. The Road is like morbidly depressing, but like pick a movie about a storm or a disaster or something like that, and then have a discussion. Like, hey, what would we do if this happened in our area, right? That's a great introduction to prepping too. So let's talk about the word prepping. I think that's a trigger for a lot of people too. And the reason being is when you ask somebody who's not a prepper what they think of preppers, what do you think they think? What do they picture? They picture a person sitting in their bunker with a gas mask and body armor and surrounded by freeze dried food with an AR slung across their chest and, some isolationist that doesn't talk to anybody. We know that's not true, but shows, I mean, it's true sometimes, but it's not usually true. Shows like the Doomsday Prepper did a massive disservice to this whole concept of emergency preparedness because they took people and made them look extreme. And I say it that way because I know somebody who was on the show and he's not extreme, but they twisted his words and edited footage to make him look like he was extreme. I asked him to come on our channel. He didn't want to do it. I think they sign NDAs and things like that, and just didn't feel comfortable talking about it like this. But I can tell you that what you saw on that channel was highly edited to make people look crazy for entertainment. And that did a big disservice to the community. And there's been some other shows like this. So I even had a friend who saw, like, there was a story in the news about this guy who matched that stereotype, and he posted something on Facebook about, like, typical tinfoil hat wearing crazy preppers or whatever. And I told him, I said, bro, that's not what it's about. Most people who are into preparedness are into self-sufficiency, being able to provide for themselves, take care of themselves. They usually are into things like canning and being able to repair things and being able to grow their own food and fishing and hunting and things like this. So what you think is a prepper is not typically what a prepper is. And he apologized and he said, I'm sorry, I kind of let the stereotype get to me. And it was okay. It created a good conversation. But that word itself, prepper, can be a trigger for a lot of people. So if you come at your spouse with, hey, I want to get into prepping, they may be thinking that that's what you're talking about, when in fact, you're just talking about, I want us to have some food storage. I want us to be able to have a way to purify water. I want us to be able to have lighting if the power goes out. I want us to be able to have food for our kids. I want us to be able to take care of our kids if we can't get to the hospital because there's a hurricane going. I want us to be able to have medications if the pharmacies don't have the medications because we've got a trade war going with China. Right. And that's what most people who are preppers are thinking about. And that's how you want to present it to them. So if you need to change the lingo to emergency preparedness or self-sufficiency or whatever, that's not going to hit that negative stigma that goes along with it, then I would encourage you to do so. So what if, so there we go. Sassy says, my husband and I started with focus on backup power and heat after surviving an ice storm. Yeah, again, it's usually a storm that kind of gets people, usually a power outage or a storm that gets people to wake up to this and start getting on board with it. Yep. I was divorced before I started prepping. TJ says, I'm sure it would have seemed like a total waste of money to him. So, and remember that I saw that burpee yoga uncle. I saw that. I'm actually interested to see what's going to come out of that. But I'm just going to throw that up there because it'll pull me off topic, and I'm trying to stay on topic. It doesn't have to be expensive in the beginning either. Like, you can just learn skills like gardening. You can learn skills like foraging. You can fishing, hunting, well, some of them are going to cost a little bit of money, but you can learn how to sew clothes. You can learn how to do canning. You can learn how to do dehydrating, and all that stuff's affordable for most families. So, and if you think about, I think when I tend to think about families that were into canning, for many, many years, a lot of them were not super wealthy families, right? Like this was actually a way you grew your own food and then you preserved it to not only because it tastes better than anything you're going to get in the store, but it was economical. It was thrifty. It was a way to save some money on your groceries. So it doesn't have to be that you break your bank, right? Do I recommend people to get a really good water purification system? Yeah, but can you do stuff on a budget to purify water in most cases? Yes, with bleach, right? Off the top of my head, I don't know the formula or I've got it written down, but bleach will purify a lot of water. It won't take out the heavy metals and things like that. There's some of the pollutants. For that, you are going to need a water purification system. But even then, I still don't have a Berkey, y'all. It's outside my budget right now. Would I love to have one? Yeah. Berkey, if you want watching this and you want to do, set something up, we can work together. But I don't have a Berkey. I would love to have a Berkey. So I work with the water filtration systems that are in my budget, and that's what you guys got to do too. We talked to Sassy was talking about the solar generated power stations, things like that. That stuff gets pricey. I went a long time without anything like that. And are they nice to have? Yeah, but I've survived storms without any of that stuff, just with like batteries for my lighting and things like that. So it doesn't have to be when you're starting out that you're like blowing your credit card. And in fact, we don't recommend that you do that here. All right. Yeah, no, I'm excited about it too, Unc. I can't wait to see what that committee brings up. I'm really excited about it. Yeah, and solar panels can be expensive, but those little portable solar panels, they're not so bad. Like Sunjack, I've got a coupon for Sunjack if you guys want to check them out down in the description. And you can, with that little 40-watt panel, I can recharge a lot of my things. I can recharge my phone. I can recharge my rechargeable flashlights. I can recharge my rechargeable batteries. So you just like a little, portable 40-watt panel can do a lot of work when you have a power outage or the grid down or whatever, right? So, don't worry about the EMPs and the zombies and the nukes at first when you're trying to get your spouse on board. You're going to scare them. Don't do that. Start with the stuff that's they can get and buy into. Little by little, if they take an interest in it, they're going to find that stuff on their own, and then they're going to ask you like, "Hey, what if we had a chemical spill in the area?" Now we can have a conversation about the gas masks, right? Now we can have a conversation about, other things, train derailments. Like, what if we had to bug out? What if we had to bug out? Now you've got that conversation is open because you've opened the door and then you allowed them to get there at their own pace. That's why these conversations often fail. Okay. Because people are like pushing for like, hey, I'm worried about Russia's going to drop a nuclear bomb on us, and your partner's not there. They're not ready to think about that. And if they don't have any sense, think about this. If you didn't know what to do for any of that stuff, it's extremely overwhelming. So we need to recognize that. But what if you had a partner who absolutely you did all these tricks and you were listening to what their objections were? That's the other thing. Listen to what their objections are and don't immediately come back with, yeah, but just listen to it and say, okay, thanks for hearing me out, right? Give it a couple days and then see if they don't come back to you with it because you're letting them think. Give them that space to think. This is another concept from marriage counseling. One thing I teach my couples in marriage counseling is you don't have to win the argument, right? You do not have to win the argument. And that's a mistake that a lot of couples make, is feeling like I got to stay up and fight and make my point heard. In fact, that's really bad advice when people tell people stay up and fight. You know what happens when you stay up and fight? You're going to eventually get to some kind of resolution. One person's going to win that argument, but you're also going to have some resentment building up, and try 15 years of resentment building up. And guess where that's going to land you? Not in a good place, my friend. So rather than stay up and fight, make your point, listen to what your partner is saying, and then say, okay, when it feels like it's getting to the point where one of you is going to raise your voice or you're going to say something mean, that's when it's time to say, you know what? I don't want us to get into a fight over this. Let's take a break. I'm going to think about what you said. Please think about what I said. We can talk about this again in a couple of days. If you get into the habit of doing that with your partner, you're going to be much better off than the couple that decides to stay up and fight every time there's a little disagreement. or don't listen to me. I've only been doing this crap for 25 years. Uh, that's my advice. And stop telling people to stay up and fight, on your little wedding cards and stuff. It's really bad advice. They're 15 years down the road, they're going to have 15 years worth of fighting till 2 a.m. and resentment. Not good. Sorry. If you've got a partner that absolutely is not on board, there's just nothing you can say is going to convince them. Here's what you're going to do. You should, and I will die on this hill. If you're in a relationship with somebody, you should have some amount of the household income that is your discretionary budget. And that person, even if they're a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad, they should have some portion of that budget that is their discretionary income. So you're going to use your discretionary income because that's your money to spend how you see fit to do a little bit of prepping within that budget. So maybe one week you buy a couple extra cans. Maybe next week you buy an extra pack of batteries. Maybe next week you buy, you save it a little bit so you can get a nice water filter. But that's your money. And all couples, I will die on this hill. All couples should have a little bit of the money that's coming into the household. That's your money, your play money, your spending money. Remember, you got to pay the bills first. We all agree on that. Mortgage, rent, energy, food, medicines. Maybe there's a family entertainment budget for your Netflix or whatever. You go out to the movies once a month, whatever. But there still should be a little bit, whether even if it's $5 a week or whatever, that's your spending money to spend how you want. And if you're the only person in the household that's the prepper because nobody else is getting on board, then you do the best you can with that $5 a week, and you learn those skills that are free or low cost, and you're going to do your part. And guess what's going to happen? Sooner or later, you are going to have that power outage, and you're going to be the one that's got the extra batteries, and you're going to be the one that has the extra food. And now you're going to have another conversation, but don't be smug. Even though you should probably have a right to, don't be smug, right? Just, this is a learning opportunity. Like, hey, I'm really glad that I saved some batteries for us. I would like to have another conversation about this now that we've had this experience. Okay. Don't be smug. Don't be a jerk about it. You were right. They're going to know you're right. And they're not going to, maybe they won't acknowledge that, but you were right. And so just, you look for that little window to gently and respectfully reopen that conversation after you've had that learning experience. Right. Or, and I don't advocate for this, but I've seen other channels talk about this. You withhold all those things. You withhold the batteries, and you let people struggle a little bit until people are getting miserable and be like, geez, sure would be nice if one of us had some batteries for these little battery powered lamps. Oh, wait, I do. I don't recommend you do that. I think that opens up opens up an opportunity for a fight to happen. Don't be that smug person. Be the person that's like, hey, I used a little bit of my spending money to do this because I care about the family, and I would like to now have another conversation about this. That's a reasonable person, right? That's a reasonable person. All right, let's go back to your comments again here. And hey, Instagram, hope you're doing all right over there. Happy Valentine's Day. Let's see. 40, yeah, those small solar panels will get a lot done. That's what I started with, was just a small solar panel, and we could charge up a couple things after the hurricane. Basically, after the hurricane, when the sun came out, put them in the back of my truck bed, and we charged up our phones and stuff like that and our battery banks. It worked for us. Yep. Start Mike. Oh, Utah Mike's got it. Start slowly, a few cans each week. Yep. Yep. And somebody mentioned, I think, Costco, Sam's Club, things like that. If you buy in bulk, a lot of times you can save your family some money. Look for the deals. Some of the people in the prepping community are phenomenal with couponing. I am not. I don't have the patience to go crazy with the couponing, but some of the other channels are phenomenal with it, and you can do amazing things with your couponing. Yeah, I probably need to talk about that on the mental health channel at some point too, TJ. All right, battery daddies are cool. Yep, definitely. Yeah, so you're right, Rob. You want to store your batteries in a good way. If you don't store them correctly, they will discharge over time. And actually, in some batteries can actually catch fire if you don't store them correctly. Gardening is a great intro, Utah Mike, for a lot of people. Um, there's something about food self-sufficiency that's like it's a natural progression from food self-sufficiency or food independence into homesteading or preparedness or whatever. I think that there's a lot of crossover there. I have a lot of friends who would say they're not preppers, but they sure are good at food self-sufficiency. All right, good questions there. Hope you all are having a great Friday night. I think I'm going to start to wind this one down. So remember, Bacon usually goes live later on tonight, so make sure you check out his channel. Sassy Gal Prepping and I are going to go live next Friday. I think we're going to be talking about mental health. She and I will get together and square that away. And if you get anything of value out of this, if you're watching on YouTube, please consider giving me a thumbs up. If you hated me, go ahead and give me a thumbs down. Either way, I appreciate that you gave me a little bit of your time tonight. And don't forget to check in the discount in the description below for some discount codes that I think will be helpful for you. I hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day weekend, and I hope that you have somebody to share that with. But if you don't, learn to also love yourself, right? Because there's been many Valentine's days in my life where I had to spend those by myself. And I know that doesn't feel great. So you have to learn to have a little bit of self-love as well. And maybe that means that you go out and you treat yourself to something really nice, or you buy yourself something really nice, because don't you deserve that? The name of the mental health channel is actually the official mental health channels, the official Mental Health Matters channel. If you want to check that out, the official Mental Health Matters channel. If it doesn't come right up, because you should see a picture of me, if it doesn't come right up, then search the official Mental Health Matters channel, Sarge, and then I know it'll come up that way. Okay, folks, I hope you have a great weekend. Keep planting your seeds, keep stacking your silver. This is Prepping with Sarge. I see that, Rob B. You should definitely do that. Let me know how it goes for you. You guys have a great night. All right, Instagram, you guys